Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 154 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We are College Football Throwdown, a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. And we're here today to talk about the Nebraska Cornhuskers getting their first win of the season, as well as some exciting news in the world of national college football, some of the big upsets that happened this weekend, and what's going to come up in the following weekend. We're recording this here on September 18th, so a lot to get to.
A lot to get to.
Yes. But before we dive into all that, of course, we've got to open up our cold beverages. I've got my Golden Road Mango Cart. This is my last one in the fridge.
Oh, Mango Cart. Yes. You know, we don't get much Mango Cart up in northern Michigan, but we have encountered it here in Lincoln, Nebraska. So particularly your mother, who loves the Mango Cart, was all about it. So, but I'm drinking one of my final Labatt Blues, enjoying that. Although I do need to give a quick plug for the 1890 NIL Collective has. There's a brewery that has sponsored a beer for them that contributes a certain amount of the money from every, beer sold to the collective. And it's called Cornhead Lager. And I tried it this past weekend, and it's actually really good. So I like it, and I'm going to be acquiring some of that over the course of the next 3 weeks while we're here in Lincoln.
I'm sure Mom loves to hear that. We'll be mail ordering Cornhead Lager.
Exactly. So here we go with a little bit of Labatt Blue here.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers, son. Cheers.
Yes. So to dive into the Nebraska side of things first, we'll tease us up with some volleyball news because, as you mentioned, you are in Lincoln, Nebraska. You'll be there for the next few weekends, and you got to go to the Nebraska-Kentucky volleyball game that was the other day. I think they were a ranked team, so they were a pretty serious opponent for us, and we managed to beat them in 4 sets.
Yes, that's correct. And it's always just a joy to have the opportunity to be in that building, the Bob Devaney Sports Center, to watch a game. And it's just an experience that, frankly, anybody who's a fan of volleyball, whether they're a Husker fan or not, would be wise to find a way to experience. It really is an event that they stage every time they have a home match that is pretty darn remarkable. And last night was it started off as not so intense a match, but after a rough start, Kentucky figured us out and really started passing the ball way better in the latter sets, and they became everything we could handle and a little bit more. We were lucky to get out of there with the victory, as it turned out. So that team, who is now 2-6, okay, 2-6. But 5 of their 6 losses are to top 25 teams, and I think 3 of those 5 are to top 10 teams. So they haven't been playing Little Sisters of the Poor. They played Pittsburgh, who's a top 10 team, a couple of times. They played us. I can't remember who else was on the schedule, but they played a murderer's row schedule. And I think it's going to pay off for them because, frankly, they probably gained a lot of confidence from this loss that they sustained to us, because now they're like, okay, we can play with anybody. They played great defense, and we played even better defense.
Yes, which is our kind of our specialty.
Yes.
And because of that win and some losses in the top 10 of current college volleyball, we are now the number 2 team in the coaches poll, just behind Wisconsin. So
correct.
We're off to a good start so far.
We are off to a good start. We've got a long way to go. The good news is we're a young team, so there's at least hope that we're going to continue to improve or see improvement with our young players learning more and more. However, we played this Kentucky match with 2 of our starters out injured. and we're hopeful that we can get them back at some point. One of them was in an auto accident, and so we don't know how long she might be out. She messed up her shoulder. Thank God it's not her swinging shoulder, but right now she can't even jump without pain. So it might be a while before she gets back. It's that we're gonna use our depth, and then the other one is one of our best defensive players, probably our second best defensive player, and a real inspiration to the team. So having her off the court was also a huge problem for us. So hopefully we'll get them back very soon because we've got two more. Actually, the next three games are against top 25 teams. So we start the Big Ten season, and it's going to be a rough ride here initially.
Right. Well, and we'll get to that a little bit, but both Nebraska major sporting teams are a little injury ridden right now, it would appear. So we'll talk about
Yes.
that. But next we have the football game, which was against Northern Illinois. And on our previous podcast, we gave our predictions for the score. I predicted that we would win 21-14, and you predicted a little higher scoring 35-17. And the final score ended up being 35-11. So you were definitely closer with your score. And frankly, it should have, well, I won't say should have been, but it very easily could have been even wider than that because they scored on the last drive of the game, touchdown, when we were playing, our second and third team guys on defense, and the game was out of reach at that point. So we really held them to just 3 points, which was very impressive by our defense.
Right. And not only did we hold them 3 points, but those 3 points were given up on a drive that started like on the 9 or 11 yard line or something like that, wherever we had that fumble. I mean, they literally had, until the final drive of the game, they had 102 yards of total offense through basically about 57 minutes of the game. And then because the outcome was decided, our coaching staff chose to put some substitutions in there. And now I'm certain that the coaches were less than pleased with the fact that our second team defensive personnel went in there and were unable to stop them and basically got marched on, because you hope that second team, when they finally get their chance, they're going to rise up and show that they're ready to start contributing with the other group. But we did not see that. Right, that was one of my disappointments in the game, was watching that take place, because we've been hearing about how the defense is really bought in and how we're developing depth. And I don't know exactly who was on the field at that moment in time. It's not like I was scrutinizing the roster, but I'm a little disappointed that we gave up that drive.
Yeah. Well, and if I recall correctly, I believe there was a roughing the passer penalty on that series of downs, which gave them an automatic first down that I thought was very questionable and shouldn't have been called. So that's one small factor. But I was also thinking of our game against Colorado, right, where the game was totally out of reach, but they threw an interception and we had Harburg in the game right as quarterback, and he managed to put together a drive and get a touchdown late against Colorado and make our score against them look a little better than it really was. And I think that little bit of confidence helped Harburg in this game. So those little drives, even if they don't affect the outcome, do matter for sure.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And that's why I say I think our coaches probably were given some, anger pills to these players that were on the field at the end, because, hey, when we put you in there, we expect you to perform. And just like the offense can gain momentum by driving and scoring late in the game, that's already, outcomes already determined, that's important stuff. Every snap counts. Every time you take a snap, with film, you better be given 100%, and you better be doing your stuff right and have your assignments right, and all that, because that's the only way you're going to build the confidence of the coaches to make them feel like, hey, I can put this guy in a game and he's going to respond. Otherwise, I'm going to try somebody else.
Yes. So in the game, as I mentioned, we played Heinrich Harburg as our quarterback. We were discussing on the previous podcast, obviously, Jeff Sims' ankle injury, and he did practice last week, later on in the week, but coach announced on the day of the game that Harburg was going to be the starter, and Jeff Sims was on the sidelines with a headset on, but he was in pads. And I saw him talking to Harburg on the sidelines a couple times on the TV cameras. You were there actually at the game, watching it in the stadium, but he was clearly, giving advice to the younger guy. And Harburg lived up to my expectations for him, I would say, and delivered a solid performance as quarterback. It took a little while. We had a nice drive and a score early, and then we kind of struggled for a lot of the first half. But as the game went on, we made some adjustments and we started figuring some stuff out. And Harburg proved that he can throw, the short to medium range passes solidly. He's definitely not a deep ball passer, but he made them pay with his legs. He had 98 yards rushing it by himself. And most importantly, we only turned the ball over once, and that one time was a sack, which I don't necessarily put on Harburg as much as, our offensive line. And then he did have one other throw that was nearly a pick that didn't end up being that way. So that was a little scary, but otherwise he did a much better.
Should have been a pick, yes. Right? It was right in the defender's hands. He threw it right to the defender.
Yes.
So that's one you gotta run that back. If I'm a coach in film session, I get to that play, and I'm really reviewing with the in the quarterback room. I'm rolling that back a few times for Harburg to say, okay, what were you looking at, and what should we be looking at? And how can we, exercise this demon, so to speak, so that you don't not see this guy, because he threw it like he did not see that linebacker at all.
Right.
At all.
Right. But still a definite improvement compared to Jeff Sims, right? Which is what I said on the previous podcast, that even if he's not as talented as a quarterback, as long as he's executing the offense and not making those kind of stupid mistakes, especially on the snap, or handoffs and things like that, I would see that as improvement, and it definitely was. And I saw a lot of positivity from the Nebraska fandom after the game about Harburg. There were definitely, the crowd seemed to be into the game once we kind of got a more solid lead, and we were able to show that against a lesser school, a MAC school like Northern Illinois, that we were able to take control of the game, which was good to see.
Right. I 100% agree with your assessment there, Alex. And you're right. The fan base definitely, it's always whoever's the new shiny toy. And, there's a big difference between playing Power 5 schools like Minnesota and Colorado versus Northern Illinois. But the fact is that Harburg focused on the right things, executed the game plan that was presented all week for him to use. And other than the fact that he had a couple of deep pass opportunities where, frankly, the receivers were open, and if he is able to get that ball in a closer proximity to where it was supposed to be, he might have had a couple of longer completions, and all of a sudden we would have been looking at a guy that probably had thrown for over 215 yards, 225 yards, something like that, and maybe even a little bit more after stretching the field like that. I think all of a sudden their defense would have had to back off, and our score might have been quite a bit larger. So you can see the potential there with an athlete like Harburg. The problem is his accuracy, and that doesn't change overnight.
Right. But talking about some stats here, we had 382 total yards of offense. Well, they had 149, like half of which came on that final drive, right? So that goes to show you how dominant we were. And he was 14 of 24 on passing it for 158 yards. And then we ran it 44 times for 224 yards, while holding them to only 26 yards of total rushing offense. So I believe I saw a stat that we're in like the top 5 in the country in terms of rush defense in this early part of the season. So we're definitely doing good.
And part of that is who you played, right? Like when it's early in the season like this with 2 or 3 games, those stats mean less. It's certainly a trend. It's a trend.
But how many teams have played a proper Power 5 opponent like Minnesota and then a top, 15 team like Colorado, right? And we still managed to pull off that stat.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
we were 8 of 14 on third downs. Well, they were 4 of 15. And I love this one. We were 5 of 5 on red zone scores. So when we got in the red zone, we always scored, which is a great one to
Exactly.
see.
That is so cool. And you know what? That is an indication of that commitment, right? And I hope that coach is emphasizing that to the team, and he's highlighting those stats just like you did there, Alex, because that is important. Because maybe the ears will be perked up of guys like Jeff Sims to understand the importance. Jeff is a guy that 94 out of 100 snaps is better than Harburg, but because of lack of concentration or just an inability to see the play develop the way he should, there are 4 plays out of 100 or 5 plays out of 100 where he makes the absolute wrong decision or physical movement, right? He releases his eyes too fast and doesn't secure the snap. He, doesn't follow through on a read, on a handoff. All those little things are the difference between him having had success in those first 2 games and us as a team probably having success to the level of victory, and not. And Jeff needs to understand that. And now he's got the pressure of Harburg to kind of force that issue. And either he's going to step up and rise to that response, or he's not. And if he doesn't, then I have a feeling that in a couple more games, he might find himself on the bench rather permanently, unless he's brought in because of injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in terms of Northern Illinois, my assessment was that, frankly, they had some passes open that their receivers dropped. There were quite a few drop passes, which obviously helped our defensive numbers. And
Yes.
their defense was definitely not bad. They had, I think it was number 1 was one of their big guys, and he kind of made some trouble for us. So they definitely had some difference makers there, and they actually managed to beat Boston College in their first game of the year, a team that we'll talk about later today. Had a very close game with Florida State. So they're not a pushover per se, and we managed to shut down their offense, and because of our great defense, it gave our offense time to figure itself out and get some adjustments. And credit to our offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield. I think he did make some adjustments to the offensive play calling to fit Harburg's strengths. And we had some nice, motions and stuff like that. I think that confused them, or, plays where our offensive line did a good job and we opened up a nice big hole to run through and things like that. So I know Nebraska fans in general have loved the general commitment to the running game we've had so far. Though we had some injuries in this game that are going to affect our ability to continue that down the season.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing is that I would have argued that he was running the quarterback too much in this game, but now he might be forced to after this game. So hopefully Harburg and Sims are ready to carry that rock, because I have a feeling they're going to be carrying it a little more than the coaches had intended.
Yeah. Well, one thing I liked about watching Harburg is he wasn't afraid to, get his shoulder down and run straight into a defender, right? He's
Right.
not a big guy, but he seems like he's ready to play some tough football. He's a native Nebraskan as well.
Well, Harburg is a pretty good sized guy. He's 220 pounds.
Okay.
He's like 6'4", 6'3", 220 pounds. He's a big dude. And he's a fast runner. He's way faster than Jeff Sims. I mean, he's probably a full tenth and a half, so about 0.15 seconds faster in the 40-yard dash than Sims. So he's a heck of an athlete, right? So we're not taking a step down in athlete by going from Sims to Harburg. What we lose is arm strength and arm accuracy that Jeff Sims has.
Right. That is definitely true. Although I'm a little questionable on the accuracy part of the Sims contract right now.
Okay, accuracy without decision making included in that formula.
Okay, got it. Without the brain upstairs.
Right.
But yes, it came out after the game that we had several key injuries against Northern Illinois. Ramir Johnson, our second running back, is out for the season. Gabe Irvin, our first team running back, also out, and then our defensive back Dwight Boodle, also out for the season. So the expectation is that some of our younger running backs like Emmett Johnson and Quinton Ives are going to step up along with Anthony Grant, right, who was kind of the main guy last year and had some good runs in this game as well. But we know that he has the tendency to cough up the ball, so he's going to have to keep focused because now he is definitely the top guy of our running back crew.
Exactly. He is our top guy, and he is a good runner, although he has this tendency when things aren't going well to run sideways instead of running forward and just get what you can. Where both of the guys that got injured were guys that understood that maybe didn't have the wiggle and the hop step that Anthony Grant has, but they had a better perception of when to just drive forward and fall forward and get everything you can on a run without having to try to create and make every run a spectacular touchdown run. You got to understand the down and distance, the circumstance in the game, all that stuff. And ball security has to be part of that.
Right. Well, and I'm looking at the stats here. So Gabe Irvin had 14 carries for 67 yards. Anthony Grant had 7 for 46. And I can recall one or two plays in particular where you did see that his, ability to make a nice cut, right? Getting him some extra yards and getting a first down, which was nice to see. And he didn't cough up the ball in this game. And we didn't actually play Ramir at all in the game, which I guess I missed. So he must have been hurt already at some point.
He got hurt. He got hurt on a kickoff.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay. So yeah, obviously we have been relying on our running backs, and that was one of the strengths of our team was the depth of our running back room. So to lose your two top running backs in one game is definitely brutal. But we do have some young guys, so we need to kind of throw them to the wolves here a little bit and see them if they step up to the plate and show the talent that they possess or not. And we do have another easier game against a Conference USA opponent, Louisiana Tech, this upcoming weekend. So it'll be a good game to get them to get their bearings and see how they do.
Right. And I'm hoping that they get moved far enough along that, the coaches feel the confidence to get them in there because they're going to need some snaps. So they're ready for, the Big Ten schedule that comes after. Right. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Both of these players are talented. They've shown flashes. They certainly have great high school film, but this is a big step up from high school to college. And so ball security often is a problem with freshmen. So that's also going to be something that's going to have to be a huge focus for our team. And I guarantee you will be a focus of the opposing team's defense. If I was the defensive coordinator for Louisiana Tech or any future opponent of Nebraska, I would be making serious note of the fact that those two guys are gone and that, hey, when we play Nebraska, we're going to be doing everything we can to hammer those players with the arm tackle so that we can pound that ball out of there because we're going to get one. We know we can get one. Those freshmen don't know what's going to hit them.
Right. And as we discussed in the previous podcast, right, we were talking about the quarterback situation. Like, should Jeff Sims play if he is healthy enough? Should it be Harburg? And you, I recall, said that if coaches felt that Sims was healthy enough, he would be the starting guy. You didn't think they would want to start Harburg. And I was more on the lines of start Harburg. Even if Sims is feeling better, you don't heal that in a week, right? So better to let him properly heal and give Harburg a chance because Sims has, not done great so far. And I think my position was validated because he came out and he did a solid job. Now the question is, Sims is continuing to heal. I'm sure he'll have snaps in practice this week along with Harburg. And we did see Chubba Purdy come out near the end of the game when it was already decided in our favor. But my vote and my suggestion to Matt Rule is that you stick with Harburg. He got the team behind him in this game. and executed what you asked him to do relatively well. Obviously, there are things to improve on for sure, but he's a sophomore, right? He has room to grow. So why not kind of put your eggs in his basket for now? And if he royally messes up, then that's when you bring in Sims or Chubba Purdy and sit him down to have a talk. You're not, like you say, you're not afraid to get out the cane and pull him back in if he does make serious mistakes. But I think for now, you stick with him as your lead guy.
Okay, you've stated your case. I would say the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So my argument would be that Jeff Sims is your starter. Jeff Sims is the guy that's taken 85% of the number one group snaps going all the way back to spring practice. You're a first year coach. You've invested a lot of time in trying to build the team chemistry and leadership aspects of Jeff Sims. He's your QB1. Yes, he's had a shaky start, but I don't abandon him. I tell him, Jeff, you know what? You're my guy. You're still my guy. But you now saw what happens with our team when we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, when we don't self-destruct. And you have been a part of that self-destruction. You need to demonstrate and build the confidence of this staff that you can do the job. So I'm going to give you the start if you're physically ready to do so, and you get enough snaps during the week so that you're prepared with our game plan. Now, if he's still struggling with his ankle and can't get the snaps during the week and isn't at full go, then maybe you do need to sit him out another week. But I think when he's finally healthy, whenever that is, I think you give him another shot. But I would say the quick hook is going to happen with Jeff Sims, where if he gets in there and demonstrates what he showed during spring practice and during the early part of fall camp, that he's the guy, then more power to him, and we're better off as a team because of it. And Harburg is the kind of team player that he was already playing basically an H-back position in the earlier games just to get on the field. So we'll find a way to use Harburg in the offense because he's too talented not to have out there, right? Heck, we might even use him at running back. So I think it's Sims unless he starts making mistakes. If he makes the same kind of mistakes that he's been making with ball handling issues or just bonehead decisions with throwing the football, hesitation, etc., then he gets the hook, and Harburg and or Chubba Purdy are going to get their chance, right? So I would say that's where you go with it, and now you're confident that Harburg has demonstrated the ability to lead the team. The team's going to have confidence in him if he does come out there, and we're going to go from there. Right. So I think Sims will be the starter this Saturday if he's healthy enough to get the majority of the snaps and knows the game plan.
Right. But if he's, like healthy enough where he could play, but he's still not 100%, you say stick with Harburg.
Absolutely. Yep. If he isn't able to demonstrate, really, frankly, fairly early in the week, so maybe today he could have taken today off, but if he's not practicing tomorrow and then Wednesday and Thursday, because they're Friday is like a nothing day, it's a walkthrough, so you only have 3 days of practice at this point: Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. He better be able to take at least 60% of the snaps over these next 3 days as the number one guy. If he can't do that because he's limited by his injuries, then maybe you got to go with Harburg for one more week.
Right. Okay. Well, and we'll see how it plays out. I saw some Husker fans online joking that Sims should be the one becoming a running back instead of Harburg,
right?
and have him be the quarterback.
I know, but I tell you, Harburg could be a hell of a running back, though. Honestly.
Yeah. So. Now talking about this Louisiana Tech game, as I mentioned, they're a Conference USA school. They're currently 2-2. They played in week 0, I believe. So,
yep.
They've had kind of a mixed record so far. And I looked up the spread, and as of like yesterday, I think it was minus 19.5 to Nebraska. Now that was before Coach today announced these injuries, right? So I think that spread might drop down a little bit, but basically they were saying we'll beat them by about the margin that we beat Northern Illinois. So what's your thinking on that? Do you think they're a tougher opponent than Northern Illinois, easier? Where do you land?
No, well, I would say that they're very similar opponent. Maybe not quite as tough as Northern Illinois would ultimately prove to be, but because of our injury situation, this is a more precarious game. Because if we put the ball on the turf because of exchange issues and stuff, because of all these new players involved in the backfield, we could be right back into a situation where we self destruct. I mean, just think about the game last week with Northern Illinois. That game was tight well into the third quarter. If we had had the typical bonehead second and third turnover by the middle of the third quarter, what do you think that score is?
Right. If that interception had actually
Yeah,
happened.
right. Northern Illinois might very well have been in the lead going into the fourth quarter if that's the case. So we are not good enough to overcome turnovers. Period. And the sooner that all of our specialists, our running backs, quarterbacks, all of those skilled people that touch the football, the sooner they understand that the single most important thing is securing the football for our team. Okay, that is the key. That's the thing that will keep us from getting blown out, generally speaking, and will put us in the best position to win the games we're capable of winning. And that's just the way it is. Let our athleticism do what it can do, but don't try to do too much.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you make a good point in that, Louisiana Tech might be slightly easier, but we have a reduced capabilities on offense, even compared to what we were just doing in this game
Right.
against Northern Illinois. So I'm going to predict that we win by a somewhat similar score, but maybe a little bit less offense, like you say, and that our defense, once again, slows them down enough to give us the time to iron out those issues if they do crop up. So I'm going to say we win 28-10.
Okay, that's good score. That's a good score. I'm going to go a little higher. I'm gonna go 38 Nebraska, but 24 for Louisiana Tech. So 38-24.
Interesting. Okay. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, this is an important game for us to win because it's kind of the last, easier, game we should win before we go up against Michigan, which is almost certainly going to be a big loss. So, yeah, it's an important confidence building step for us as we move further on into the season.
Right. Well, and I mean, I don't want to be having the conversation next week about a 1-3 Nebraska team having to face Michigan on national TV. That's just not something I want to talk about. Now, a 2-2 Nebraska team that's responded after some early season, ball security and just mental breakdown issues to have won two winnable football games, granted, but two games where we played reasonably clean, like we did this past week. Then all of a sudden, I can have the confidence that okay, maybe there's a chance that we can hang with Harbaugh and the Harbaughets from Michigan, for a half. And at halftime, we can go into the halftime within striking distance of Michigan. That would be a huge plus in our minds. And then if we at some point wear down, okay, it is what it is. But if you hang in there at halftime and then, their quarterback melted down, Michigan's did this past week. If he were to have another one of those kinds of games against us in that Nebraska environment, and we found ourselves hanging around and being in the mix in that game in the middle of the third quarter, shoot, then all bets are off, right? Then emotion and confidence and all that stuff can start doing weird shit.
Right. Now talking about the national side of things, this was a week where there weren't as many top 25 type matchups. It didn't look like it was going to be as crazy of a week, but as it usually does, college football delivers some excitement no matter what the weekend is. And one interesting storyline, obviously, that was going on was Michigan State. They lost Mel Tucker last week. He was suspended from being the head coach because of a scandal that we talked about last week. So they had to play at home against Washington. and they ended up getting crushed 41-7. I did not watch any of that game, but from what I heard and read, Washington scored most of those points in the first half and really took their pedal off the gas completely in the second half, and just kind of coasted to the victory from there. So they could have made it an even uglier score. And now today, Mel Tucker has been officially fired from his position at Michigan State for cause, so that he won't get all that money that was in his contract. So Michigan State is officially sticking with this current interim head coach, and no doubt frantically looking for a replacement pronto.
Yep, I think that's a good summary. And what can you say? Mel Tucker made some really bonehead decisions. Not just one bonehead decision, but many bonehead decisions, and he's gonna pay dearly for it. But for Michigan State, the football team now, I'd like to think that maybe last weekend was the bottom for them, and now they're done feeling sorry for themselves. They're going to have had a second week with the new staff and personality and culture that's going to try to be established by the interim, and they're going to rise to the occasion a little bit. And we'll see. I mean, we just experienced that at Nebraska this past year with the firing of Scott Frost after just a few football games. So they're going to go through the same thing we did, right? And after a game or so, Mickey Joseph and his interim organization really were able to start moving Nebraska in some positive directions. And I think you'll see the same thing at Michigan State.
Right. I'm curious because obviously we have plenty of friends who are still living in Michigan, and many of them are MSU fans. Have you heard anything from them about all the chaos that's been going on there the past few weeks?
Well, number one, they're speaking softly because they're embarrassed.
Right.
Number two, they're actually disappointed in the way it transpired, but nobody's disappointed that Mel Tucker's gone.
Right.
Most people felt that the athletic director, who gave him the contract that he was enjoying until today, was a bonehead, terrible decision by the athletic department and their leadership. So to get out from underneath that in a way that you have show cause and you don't have to pay it, most Michigan State fans are like thumbs up. They're tired of being the laughing stock of the country from a PR standpoint, right? In the long-term view of things, turn the page and move on.
Right. Yeah, because I believe Mel Tucker, I want to say 2 seasons ago, maybe 3, he had a really good year, like a 10-win type year. But then like last year was like 5 wins or something like that. Like he hasn't been able to keep that success going.
Right. Well, and it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to see how people with the advent of the portal, he was one of the first ones to really aggressively go out and get difference makers out of the portal, and it worked the first year. Then he did it. He obviously tried to do it again the next year, and there's a lot of factors. He didn't recruit as well, so to speak, so he didn't get as many premier players out of the portal as he did the year before. And then those that he did get didn't translate to success on the field the way they had the previous year. And I think that's going to be the problem with this portal, is that there are going to people who commit to that in any large degree are going to tend to be up and down, right? They're going to sometimes hit, and then they're sometimes going to miss. And when they miss, it can be a disaster, right? And that's not building a program. That's not building a culture. That's having to reset the button every year. And
Yes.
I think that long term, that's not a way that any coaching staff is going to want to manage their program all the time. They're going to want to initially do that, maybe. The obvious example today is Colorado, and watching their success. But now the big question is what happens this next year. And in all likelihood, I think Coach Sanders is smart enough and is planning that he's going to recruit, high school kids to build his program for the most part this coming recruiting cycle, and get a few select transfers, right? I speculate him doing that. He might still take a few more, but the bottom line is that's the methodology, right? Eventually, you want to get to recruiting freshmen as much as you can, so you're building your own culture.
Right. Well, and not to mention that Dion was able to take advantage of this special circumstance where, because the transfer portal rules are just recently, inducted, and because of COVID and that sort of stuff, right? I believe 2022 and 2023 were years where you could go over the limits, the traditional limits for how many transfer portal players you can move in one season. Moving forward, teams can't just basically swap out an entire roster of players the way he basically did.
If you're a new coach, you can do that. You still can do that. The rules still allow that. There's no limit on the number of new players you could bring into the program. You need to be back to the 85 scholarship limit, by a certain date in the fall, but that's the only thing that has to happen. Now, there's a few other things. Number one, there are NIL monies now that can be used in lieu of a scholarship, where you could effectively go above the 85 scholarship limit by simply having NIL money that allowed you to pay a certain number of players, probably players that are already on your team, who you quietly shift to NIL status, for lack of a better term, and thereby releasing their scholarship to be made available to an incoming player who could help and contribute to the team's success. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of backdoor, behind scenes movement, not just in football, but in all sports. And it's going to dramatically affect the sport, going forward. However, these first few years were even more significantly affected because you had this extra pool of athletes because of COVID years. That's about to end, right? This is the last year where the COVID extra year guys are a big factor. Starting next year in the spring, for example, or at the end of this season, when the portal opens in December, there won't be as many of those seniors available as there were in the past, because there's not that extra year.
Right. I'll have to research that a little bit, because I had thought that this was saying that they're reintroducing the 25 initial signing limit starting next year.
Oh, I've read nothing about that, but that wouldn't surprise me. The NCAA keeps bouncing all over the place on this stuff. They swing from one extreme to the other. So
right. Yes. This
wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. This says that that 25 initial counter limit is coming back in 2024. So that's what I meant when I said that what Dion did, you can't do going forward.
I did not know that. That's actually the NCAA trying to do its job then.
There we go. And one other thing on the transfer point, our previous quarterback from last year, Casey Thompson, went to FAU and was having some success there, but unfortunately he tore his ACL in the game against Clemson this past weekend, so he is out for the season. Which obviously I'm sad about, because I, liked Casey and I want him to succeed where he's at. But at the same time, it does kind of make me think from the Nebraska perspective, those who were, saying, oh, it sucks that Casey left. If we had him here instead of Sims, we'd be way better off. Well, maybe not.
Right. Well, and I feel bad for Casey, because his whole modus why he made the decision that he did was because he was already in his 6th year, right? He was taking advantage of multiple transfers and a 6th year of eligibility because of COVID. So this was his final year, right? Even a redshirt year because of an injury like this is not really in the cards. He's not coming back next year, right? So he's done. And given the fact that he basically had surgery on his shoulder after a season after Nebraska, he had a surgery, I think, after a limited playing at Texas the previous year before Nebraska. And then he goes to FAU and he tears his ACL. Bottom line is, he's done. He doesn't have an NFL future. He's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's sad. That's sad.
Yes, definitely. Now, returning to week 3 of college football, probably the biggest game was Tennessee versus Florida, which is a home game for Florida. We actually gave predictions for that. You said that Tennessee would win 42-35. Well, I said that Florida would win 42-35. And the actual score ended up being quite a bit lower than we were expecting, of 29-16, with Florida getting the W.
Yep, you won that one. And Tennessee, if you looked at what they did last year, you would have looked at them and said, based on the players coming back and everything, that they were in a position to take a step forward. They got a young coach who's doing well, or I should say, a newer coach. And so I can't really explain why they have struggled maybe to be not better than they are, but it just highlights the critical nature of the quarterback position. You have to have a quarterback that's going to be able to lead and make great decisions and secure the football and do the basic things so you don't beat yourself. And if you don't have that, you know what? Even if you have all the pieces and you have maturity and you have all the other things, not really going to matter.
Right. I watched the highlights for that game, and Tennessee had some missed tackles that were pretty egregious, that let Florida get some big plays across, along with struggling themselves offensively. Their quarterback got sacked quite a bit. But to their credit, I believe Florida scored 26 of those 29 in the first half, so it was a pretty big lead. And then they held them to only 3 points the whole second half. So I'd say the defense rallied, but the offense just couldn't get going.
Right. And that's the thing. See, I mean, their quarterback, who started his career at Michigan, and then transferred to Tennessee, and was going to be all everything. Initially, they thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread, because he's, again, very much like a Jeff Sims. He is a physical phenom, right? He is the prototypical, 6'5", 6'6", tall, strong, quick athlete, quarterback that is the prototype that you might want. But then when you actually get him in game situations, it's not always translating. So, and he ended up struggling and did not get the starting job until last year, and then had some success last year. Well, then he was a Heisman Trophy list guy at the beginning of this season. So, I mean, I don't know. You just don't know until you know.
Yep. And then there were two interesting upsets of, Power 5 or Power 4, I guess we should call it now, teams that kind of got my attention. One was my alma mater, Ohio University, beating Iowa State at home 10-7 in a very, defensively oriented game. And then a much more surprising score, Southern Alabama beating Oklahoma State 33-7. It was at home for Oklahoma State, and it was 23-0 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Oklahoma State, similarly, with this theme we've been talking about, they've been rotating 3 different quarterbacks. They haven't decided on who their guy is, and clearly they're not finding him. So Mike Gundy and Matt Campbell both in a bit of trouble.
Right. Well, and who was it that Oklahoma State played that beat them?
Southern Alabama.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the Ohio score doesn't surprise me so much with Iowa State.
Right.
Iowa State had just lost the previous week to Iowa. That's always an emotional rivalry. So coming out flat against Ohio U kind of makes a little sense. And they were playing Ohio U at Ohio U. Right. So they were playing on Frank Solich Field. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that after the game was over, Tim Albin, who was Coach Solich's offensive coordinator and became his successor at Ohio U, gave an acknowledgement to Frank, and so did the players, and just the pride they had in playing on that field.
Well,
that was kind of cool.
I saw one fun fact just while I saw it on Wikipedia of all places, but it said that since it was named Frank Solich Field, which was sometime last year, apparently they have not lost at home. So they're still undefeated at home on Frank Solich Field.
There you go. So, but Tim Albin is a guy that I loved when he was an assistant coach at Nebraska under Frank Solich. And so I've kind of followed his career, and I love his philosophy. he's couched in the Nebraska history and traditions, and so I'm a fan.
There we
And
go.
as far as the Oklahoma State thing, man, that that really blows me away. So that's the thing about football. That's why they line up and play the game. That's why this week we can't sleep on Louisiana Tech. You better play.
Definitely not. And then another game in that vein, Alabama won their game against Southern Florida, which was at home for Southern Florida, but the score was only 17-3. And Southern Florida actually led the game 3-0 for the majority of the first half. Their quarterback was sacked 5 times, and they tried 2 other quarterbacks. After the disappointing loss to Texas, they benched the quarterback who was in that game, tried 2 of their other guys, both of whom didn't do so great. So now the guy who was the quarterback during the Texas game is apparently back as the starter.
Well, there you go. I mean, but again, so it just proves that, if you go back and look, how many number one recruiting classes has Alabama had over the last 5 years? And I bet you, well, I should say number one or number two, right? I'll bet you that there are recruiting services that identify to them as one or two every year of the last 5 years. So that roster is loaded with premier talent. Most people would view as NFL or future NFL talent. And because they don't have an established, consistent quarterback, they appear to be struggling. Now, if they find that quarterback eventually and they settle in, then then the gears shift, right? But it just shows how important it is that you have a quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And then the last game we'll talk about here real quick is the Colorado State game that was at home for Colorado. And it lived up to its hype as a rivalry game, and it being a 43-35 victory for Colorado in double overtime. Colorado State was actually leading for pretty much the whole game. Colorado scored late to tie it up.
Yep.
And it was a weird game. There were Colorado State turned the ball over 4 times, while Colorado turned it over twice. And Colorado had 10 penalties for 87 yards, and Colorado State decided to one-up them with 17 penalties for 182 yards, which is a insane number to me.
It is insane. And the turnovers, too, were devastating for Colorado State because they were moving the ball pretty much at will for most of that game. And they simply stopped themselves with penalties and turnovers. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Well, and so there are 2 situations that I saw people discussing after the fact, because of course Colorado won in overtime. So people are reviewing these key moments of decisions by Colorado State. So it's 4th and 2. You're at the Colorado 45-yard line, and the coach chose to punt it. And to their credit, they have a good punter, and the punter brought it down to like the 2-yard line. So they pinned Colorado deep and forced them to go the distance to score 8 points, which is what they needed to tie the game, which of course Colorado did. So people were wondering, well, should you have gone for the 4th down, right? And tried to just end the game there on your own terms.
I say absolutely not. When you have a punter who you have confidence in, and a defense that has basically up to that point held Colorado to like what, probably 20 some points, right?
Yeah, it was 20 points.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not like Colorado was scoring every time they got the ball. So I think absolutely you punt the ball in that situation, and you trust your defense is going to be able to keep them from moving the ball 98 yards, right?
Right. And also their running of the football, Colorado State's rushing was not great. It was the passing game where they're having success. So on a 4th and 2, if you're not confident in your running game, I can definitely see the logic of punting it. So I generally agree with you. I think that was a totally defensible position, or decision, I should say. But the second one I'm more questionable about, which is it's overtime. Colorado scores, gets 7 points. Colorado State scores a touchdown. Okay, you're in overtime. You're an away game against Colorado. They're considered to be the better team. You're the underdog. Do you go for 2 there and just try to end the game because he kicked the extra point, went to second overtime, and lost? So there,
are you sure it was at Colorado?
Yes, I'm 100% positive.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, the question is if you're the underdog, do you go for 2 there? I think in that situation, in overtime, you should just go for it there.
Well, you know what? I agree with you, Alex. If I was the coach in that set of circumstances, and I hopefully by that time, right, in the season and everything, that you have practiced this, overtime scenario and situation multiple times with your team, and you and your coaching staff have a favorite list. You have a half a dozen plays that you've honed in on and said we could run any of these 6 plays if we needed to score 2 points in an overtime situation. We would run one of these plays, and so it should be easy to locate the play you wanted to run and all that just based on circumstance. So,
right.
And if you're away and you have a chance to win it, you go for it, right?
Yeah. Yep. I think I agree with that one. Now, looking ahead to week 4 of college football, in contrast to this past week, this upcoming weekend has a lot of big games, a lot of top 25 matchups. The biggest one being Ohio State, Notre Dame. It is at home for Notre Dame. Both teams have not lost yet. And we've talked before about how there's some pressure right on Ohio State's coach to perform. The Ohio State fans have very high standards. So I don't know. I'm kind of, even though I think Ohio State is probably the more talented team, I'm kind of leaning Notre Dame here. What do you think?
I'm leaning Ohio State still because I honestly haven't been all that impressed by Notre Dame. If you look a little deeper into their not their early season games, I don't think they've looked all that great, right? So I don't know. I mean, I know that Notre Dame's coach is a very good defensive coordinator, so he's got a lineage of being pretty salty on the defensive side of things. And Ohio State definitely has some issues. They have shown themselves to not be fully in sync yet. So I totally acknowledge that, but I think Ohio State's defense has played pretty darn well, and they have wide receivers that are spectacular. So as long as Ohio State's quarterback, which is the big question mark, doesn't lay an egg and make bad decisions and have bad things happen like we've been talking about throughout this podcast, I think Ohio State is more clearly the better team, and I think they win the game.
Okay. Well, I just took a quick look at both of their schedules so far, and neither of them have really played teams of real note. Although Notre Dame did play NC State, right? So they're like a more solid team.
They're a conference rival, yeah,
right.
Conference team.
Right, and they beat them pretty solidly. So yeah, I think it'll be a close game, but I'll give the edge to Notre Dame. I'll say it'll be 31 Notre Dame to 28 Ohio State.
Okay. I'm going to go 31-21 Ohio State wins.
I like it.
So you're saying Ohio State's going to win?
No, I'm saying
you're saying Notre Dame's going to win?
Notre Dame. I'm going with Notre Dame.
Okay.
Especially,
I'm going to say Ohio State wins.
Yeah, I might have gone differently if it was away, but it's at home for Notre Dame, and that stadium's always a tough one to play in, of course.
Yeah, that is true. I might be, and Ohio State has a tendency to underperform away from home more so than at home. I mean, they're really hard to beat at home. So, maybe I'm making the wrong choice there, but I'm going to stick with it. 31-21.
All right. And then on the back of what we were just talking about, Alabama, they're playing at home against Ole Miss. Or once again, I would say they're the favorite. But, they have been not the Alabama we're used to seeing for the past decade for sure. So Ole Miss maybe can pull off the upset here.
So what are you thinking?
Well, I'm taking a quick look at their schedule because I haven't really paid much attention to them. Let's see. They beat Georgia Tech. They beat Tulane. And they beat Mercer. Okay, so the Georgia Tech win was 48-23. That was just last week. So, yeah, I think I'll stick with my guts here and keep calling for the upsets. So I'm going to say Ole Miss manages to beat Alabama in a lower scoring game because I think Alabama's defense is still salty, but clearly they have struggles on offense. And they'll have the guy who played at Texas, right, will be playing in this game, who's talented, but prone to making mistakes, throwing picks and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll say that they win. Let's say 24-17.
24-17, Ole Miss wins.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Now, number one, I'm going to say that you're not alone in your pick, because I think this is the popular, pick for an upset this week. Is everybody's riding that? Well, that absolutely plays into Nick Saban's hand.
Right.
Nick Saban loves this stuff, right? And I have a feeling, it's not like his quarterbacks aren't talented. They just haven't made a lot of decisions yet. Well, I tell you what, you just put the Crimson Tide in a corner, and they're going to come out like a wounded lion. And I have a feeling Alabama at home is going to be very difficult to beat. So I expect an Alabama victory, and I'm going to say it's going to be higher scoring. It's going to be like 35 for Alabama and 21 for Ole Miss.
All right. And then last game we'll give a score for here is Colorado, Oregon. It's at home for Oregon. Obviously, we've followed Colorado's season pretty closely so far. In terms of Oregon, they played against Texas Tech and won, but it was 38-30, so pretty close game. And then they crushed Hawaii and Portland State. So on the one hand, Colorado has kind of played tougher competition so far, right? They've played two kind of Power 5 opponents, right, already.
Yep.
But I think we had a solid chance to beat them, right, if we didn't make the mistakes we did. And clearly Colorado State, if they didn't, have those extra turnovers and, 200 yards of penalties, probably should have won, right? So I think Oregon wins this game and kind of puts a hole in the sails of the Colorado fans that are high on Deion Sanders right now. So I'll say it's a pretty high scoring game, but Oregon wins 45-35.
Okay, a good score. I'm also going to go with Oregon, and I'm going to go with my heart a little bit more on this. And I am hopeful that because Shadir Sanders is not going to have his top receiving threat, that they're going to struggle more to score. And so I'm going to say that they're only going to score 21 points, and Oregon's going to score 49 points. So I'm going to say somewhat of a blowout. There might be a little garbage time scoring going on, but it's going to be 49-21 Oregon.
Yes, I meant to mention that when we were discussing the Colorado State game, one big thing was that Travis Hunter took kind of a nasty late shot that apparently hurt his liver, and so he's out for like the next month. And he is their best player on both offense and a really good player on defense. He was one of those guys who was a dual threat on both sides of the ball, so it really hurts to lose him for sure.
Absolutely, and I think that they don't have the depth on defense at all. And with Oregon's talent on offense, I think they're just going to run them out of the gym. And I might be understating it at 49 points. That's just my thought about Oregon. Okay. Now the only thing is that Colorado still does have some offensive talent, and their quarterback is good, but he might very well be running for his life, and so he's going to get a couple of big hits in, and so they'll score a few points, but they're not going to be able to keep up with Oregon, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. And then we won't do full predictions here, but there are some other interesting games. Florida State is playing against Clemson at home. Florida State played a close game against Boston College, and they won 31-29. So they kind of avoided a scare there, and now have to play home with Clemson. And then Penn State is playing against Iowa in their home stadium at Penn State. So that's an interesting matchup in the Big Ten.
Yep. Well, just quickly, I think Penn State's going to beat Iowa comfortably. And then on the other side, did you say the Florida State game is at Clemson?
Yes.
Well, that makes the outcome a little less likely, but I really think Florida State's going to win that football game. I think Clemson has some real issues, and that aren't going to be easy to address in the short term. So I just think Florida State's the better football team. But since it's being played in Clemson, playing in Death Valley is tough. So I just think Clemson might be able to, rise up with the talent they have and make things kind of miserable for Florida State. But I'm still going to go with Florida State as the victor, but it'll be close.
Okay. I think you may be right there. Though one interesting thread I'm kind of following right now is we don't, at least it's still early, of course, but so far we don't really have a clear number one team, right? Because like Georgia has been the number one. Of course, they're the defending national champions, and they played against South Carolina this past weekend and won 24-14 at home for Georgia. So, a solid win, but certainly not dominant in any sense. They were in a real fight with that team. Florida State, like I mentioned, they're number 3, but they nearly lost to Boston College. Alabama's struggling. Ohio State, right, has had some struggles. Washington destroying Michigan State the way they did. I'm going to be kind of curious to keep an eye on them because it seems like they might have some real offensive firepower, and a very solid quarterback, right, in a time where a lot of other teams are uncertain in that position.
Exactly. Quarterback play is key. There's just no doubt about it. That's why there's such a great value placed on having the right guy there. And now some of these other schools that you mentioned, they're going to figure out their quarterback position. The talent's there. That player just needs to get more comfortable and grow into the position. So some of those quarterbacks are going to start performing a lot better, right? But where Washington has a mature, established starter who's just doing what he knows how to do. I think some other teams are going to kind of catch up with Washington in that scenario.
Yep, you may be right. So we'll see how that plays out over the course of this week. Hopefully we'll be coming to you next week saying that we're a 2-2 Nebraska team heading into that critical Michigan game and see where we go from there.
Exactly. That's what we need to have happen if we hope to, build on the momentum of as the season progresses. And like we've talked about, the whole goal here was to get the 6 wins. I know that's a big uphill battle at this point, but it's absolutely necessary for us to win this game this week for us to stay on schedule for the possibility that our final game of the year might be the chance to get to 6 wins.
That's definitely true. This is a critical game. So we hope you all out there enjoyed listening to this episode. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you search for College Football Throwdown, you can leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing from the fans. We'll read your comments out on the air if you wish. So thank you all for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.